So let's get this show on the road. Good morning. I am Sandra Kurtinitis. I'm the president of this wonderful college, and I welcome you to our CCBC Catonsville campus and to the third annual MACC Summit. We're very, very pleased to host it. We're going to take good care of you. We will feed you well. We will make sure you know where you're going. If you're confused, just find, we don't always wear these, you see. But today we are wearing black-eyed Susans. If we are part of the core, that's going to make sure you get where you are going. So if you get confused, you get lost, just find somebody, not me, because I probably can't help you, but our very well-trained and knowledgeable volunteers will be able to do that. So in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce Dr. Guy Altieri, the president of the President's Group, who will introduce our guests and who will frame the focus for today. But I would like to just take a few minutes to extend some comments about the significance of the conversations that we will have today. You know, to borrow a classic phrase, this is the best of times, this is the worst of times, if you are a community college professional. Community colleges are on everyone's lips. We are on everyone's radar screens, and that is a mixed blessing. A high profile certainly makes a large target, and such fame comes with a price and a set of challenges, the like of which we have not seen before, and you will hear before this morning is over, you will hear about a lot of them. Funding compression, demands for accountability, financial aid reform, an emphasis upon success as well as access, and something that's particularly troubling, a misguided impression that remediation at the college level is a waste of money. There are those, almost as we speak here today, there are those who loudly proclaim that developmental education is a scam perpetuated by people like us who milk it as a cash cow. There are those who are demeaning, ridiculing our use of Accuplacer as a placement mechanism, simply referring to it snidely as that $2 test. So these words are out there, and that's why it is so important for us to come together. And I think in such a wonderful way, Dr. Bumphus is with us today. This is the document that he has brought his leadership to on a national level. This is the document that focuses our discussion today. And the important thing is that we have in this room just about 400 of Maryland's brightest and best community college professionals, and all of us are fully capable and ready to focus on the themes that we'll hear about this morning. So, you know, in Maryland, we are blessed. We have a governor and a legislature that, and most of our counties who recognize the connection between education and the state's economic well-being. And I believe that we will all undertake this challenge that Dr. Bumphus is going to share with us, redesign, using a word that Dr. DeRionne Pollard used recently, that we do this from an abundance model. We're comprehensive community colleges. We're proud of that. We educate and train artists and poets, as well as engineers, HVAC technicians, certified nurse assistants, accountants, and teachers. So believing that if community colleges count, and they do, then we must count everything that we do. The Maryland community colleges, and I can't say enough about the leadership of our community colleges as a great resource for all of us. The 16 Maryland community college presidents created and signed a completion pledge called A Promise to Act. It embraced a broad definition of completion, which includes degrees, certificates, transfer, and workplace certification, one amazing open door that leads to many hallways. And since that time, be proud of this, since that 3 years ago, that pledge was signed, our Maryland community colleges have already increased degree completion by 33% and certificate completion by 38%. That is terrific, and we should give ourselves an applause. We've accomplished a great deal. There's much more that we have to do. I think you're going to hear our professionals today as they talk about this. So I would like to conclude my remarks by borrowing a phrase from a Dow Chemical advertisement. And it is simply this: solutionism is the new optimism. In other words, finding ways to fix things in a positive and proactive way. At CCBC, we are fond of saying we can engage in no small conversations, and I believe that that is true for all of us in the Maryland community colleges. Given our collective challenge, however, we think, and your presidents believe this, that we can find solutions that work, not just for 25 or 100 students who would thrive in any rarefied, heavily supported environment, but for the thousands who sit in our classrooms across the state. And the best thing is, we've got you. We don't need million-dollar consultants. Yeah, I know you'd like to get $1 million, but we don't need million-dollar consultants to tell us what to do. The experts are already here. There are rooms full of us on campuses all across the state. So our secret weapon is not dollars. It is the talent and commitment of our faculty and staff and the extraordinary can-do spirit of our people. Show us a problem, we'll fix it. So if solutionism is the new optimism, then I would put my money on the Maryland community colleges to develop new ways of ensuring that the magic of our open door and the promise implicit within it continues to be a bridge to the future for our students. And since Bill Gates hasn't discovered any of us yet, much to his lack, I think, and since none of us will expect to get millions of dollars in new money out of the upcoming legislative session, we will do what we've always done, and that is rely upon the grit, the tenacity, the talent, and the dogged determination that is the hallmark of every community college professional in this room. This is an important conversation. We're glad that you're here today. And now I would like to introduce our great colleague, Dr. Guy Altieri. He is the man who actually has to corral 16 presidents into actually codifying some kind of policy or coming to some kind of agreement. For that, I think he gets a gold star. He gets a gold star for many other things, too. So with that, let me introduce Dr. Altieri, the president of Hagerstown.
Getting presidents to agree, wow, it's not that hard. Just have an awful lot of money to distribute, right? Well, thank you very much, Sandra, for the introduction, and I too want to welcome everyone to the third annual MACC Completion Summit. This is absolutely spectacular. Roughly 400 people, 3 years in a row, coming together to share, to collaborate, and to celebrate our best practices. One of the most exciting things about doing work in the community college sector is the fact that we do like to work together, as contrasted to some of our colleagues in the universities and other entities in higher education. In my 40 years of community college work, I've always taken great pride in the ability and the desire of community colleges to share with one another. And the very fact that we in Maryland have put together this annual completion summit and have come forward as educators to share what we know works, what perhaps does not work as well. And the reason we do this is I think we all believe students come first and student success is clearly what we're all about. There is no question in my mind that if you compare what we do in Maryland with most of the other states, Maryland comes out, if not on the top, close to the top, in regard to our effectiveness in fulfilling the community college mission that we all so dearly subscribe to. It is my great pleasure this morning to take on a couple of tasks as we get our summit started. The first task, very, very important, is to thank the good people of CCBC. Hosting this event is a monumental task. To do it several years in a row is even more unusual. Dr. Kurtinitis and everyone who was part of the CCBC staff deserves a hearty round of applause, especially those folks here at Catonsville. We like it so much, we want to keep coming back. But most of us know how hard it is to host 400 people, especially hungry community college people. It's quite a challenge. I also want to thank the MACC staff, Bernie, Jody, Brad, Emily. They too play a significant role in organizing an event like this, and we couldn't pull it off without them. And finally, I want to thank our panelists in advance. I'll be introducing them a little later, but the panelists and the workshop presenters, they put an awful lot of work thinking about what they wanted to share today, and so many of us are going to learn so much today with their presentations. So I thank the panelists and the workshop presenters. My second task is to make some quick introductions, and I wanted to start off with Dr. Danette Howard, who we all know as the MHEC secretary. She was very enthusiastic about joining us today, but we got a call a few moments ago indicating she would not be able to make it because of a sick child, and we know she has her priorities straight. I also wanted to indicate that we're expecting John Ratcliffe, who works in the governor's office, who is the governor's education policy advisor, to be joining us sometime today. And we do have with us currently Richard Harris from the Department of Legislative Services. Could I ask him to stand to be recognized? He's the one who helps us convince the delegates and senators that Maryland community colleges are not only efficient, but extremely effective. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the American Association of Community Colleges. Many of you know him for his many, many years of community college work, some of those years in Maryland. Dr. Walter Bumphus has graciously accepted our invitation to be part of our panel discussion today. And just prior to starting, I asked him if he could share also what he sees in his crystal ball in regard to what those folks in Washington are going to do with the budget challenges they have. If only Congress operated the way a typical community college operates, I don't think we'd have these challenges. But Walter has graciously accepted the challenge to give us some insight. None of us know exactly what's going to happen, but I think many of us are extremely concerned, especially more long-term in regard to financial aid support for our students, what may happen with Perkins dollars, and so forth. All of this is very, very important to the work we do, and any insights he can give us will help us all as we think about planning for the future. I did want to point out that Dr. Bumphus played an instrumental role in forming the most recent AACC Commission on the Future of Community Colleges. The Commission's report, Reclaiming the American Dream, which Dr. Kurtinitis pointed out earlier, is in all of your packages, and he's going to be highlighting for us some aspects of that he thinks is most significant. Once I finish introducing the other panelists, Dr. Bumphus will come to the podium to start offering his remarks. But before we do that, I do want to point out who we have on the panel. In your agenda, you see their names listed, and I wanted to start off with Dr. DeRionne Pollard, who is the president of Montgomery College, one of the two first colleges in Maryland. Montgomery and Hagerstown were both founded in 1946, and although we don't rewrite history in Hagerstown and they don't rewrite history in Montgomery County, we just spin it a little differently in interpreting who really was the first community college in the state. But we're very, very pleased to have her with us today. She also was a member of the AACC commission that produced this fine report. We also have with us Professor Jennifer Lara, who is a faculty member at Arundel Community College. She also served on the commission, and she teaches in their education program at Arundel, and she'll be offering us the faculty perspective today. We also have two other individuals who we invited to be part of the panel, and they come from important MACC affinity groups. We have Dr. Sharon Pierce, who is the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Howard Community College, and she is the current chair of the Chief Academic Officers Affinity Group. And we have Dr. Richard Midcap, who's the Vice President of Student Success and Enrollment at Chesapeake College, and he also is chair of an affinity group. He chairs the Chief Student Affairs Officers Group, and he'll be providing a perspective from that vantage point. I know these five panelists will do a terrific job of getting us started today, getting us thinking about completion, its importance, and further enhancing student success in the community college sector. So without further delay, let me invite Dr. Bumphus to get things started. Each of our speakers, we've asked them to make presentations of about 8 minutes, and then from there, we'll go to a full panel discussion. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much, man. Wow. Let me say, I guess you can come back home again. It's great to be back in Maryland and great to be with a number of colleagues who know me very, very well. And it's really great to see a lot of old friends here today. You know, I listened to Guy talk about which college was the oldest, and we had those battles back in the 70s in Maryland. So it's good to see you guys are continuing some of those same kind of discussions. Before I get started today, I will make a few comments about the fiscal cliff, as Guy has asked me to do. But I'd like to also ask you, if you do not have one of these cards, this card here is a card we put together that have the 7 recommendations of our 21st Century Commission report. We've got a couple of folks here who have some additional cards. My Chief of Staff, Dr. Angel Royal, is sitting right up here. And I know I've got a young lady who's an intern with my office this year back in the back. So if you need a card, if you will raise your hand, or if you can maybe make a way back, they'll come down the aisle and make sure we pass one out to you. Dr. Kurtinitis, I would like to join Guy in commending you, Community College, Catonsville Community College, and the Baltimore County Community Colleges for hosting this event. Guy asked me if Maryland was not the best state in the union in regards to what you all were doing with student success, and I had to remind him that we have 1,167 community colleges, all of whom I love very much, but I do have to admit a certain bias for Maryland. You know, I spent 14 years in this state, And Mike Carey, if he's still here, will probably tell you he and Graham Van Zant, who was here, taught me everything I know about community colleges. Mike, where are you? I saw you earlier. You still here? He is up here. But I can also say that I can almost find all 16 of the community colleges in Maryland. That's not something I can do when I'm visiting all of the states. I think we have now concluded with my listening tour that I have visited close to about 24 of the states, and I think close to 400 community colleges in the 2 years I've been in the office. But we're having a good time. Guy, to your question about my crystal ball and the fiscal cliff, my crystal ball is really developed every morning watching Morning Joe. I don't know if any of you watch Morning Joe, but I watch Morning Joe every morning as I'm trying to do a little workout, eat breakfast, and do some of those things as I prepare for work. I have to tell you, for those of you in the room that know David Boehm, our Senior VP for Governmental Relations, this is something we do keep a close eye on, and we've got a couple of webinars that we've just concluded, and I think we've got one more planned with the American Council on Education next week that speaks to our positions on sequestration, and that's a new word for most of us, isn't it? And what's happening with the fiscal cliff. I have to tell you, though, I don't pretend to have any inside knowledge on this. I'm actually encouraged. I'm optimistic that there will be an agreement reached. Now, what that agreement will be, I'm not really sure about, but I do believe there will be an agreement reached. We got too much riding on it. We got too much at stake if those domestic cuts take place. I get folks that ask me all the time, how do you feel about the election, Walter? And I have to say, I would have felt great either way. I was prepared to work with whomever was elected as president, but the one thing we do know Secretary Duncan, we know Undersecretary Cantor, and we know the policies that we can expect now for the next 4 years. I've had folks ask me, Walter, the president sure didn't mention community colleges a lot in his State of the Union speech. Did you write it? And I said, no. We got a great relationship with the administration, but the president's very capable of writing his own speeches. So I would have to say to you, we're very fortunate as a community college association to have a great relationship with this administration. We've got issues on the table such as Pell Grants, Perkins, and a number of workforce training initiatives that are really, really key to most of your colleges, most of your campuses. So when I stand before you today, all I can say, Guy, is I'm encouraged. I don't look at this from a pessimistic standpoint. I have to say to you, I do believe there will be some compromises reached. Every day when I listen to comments on the evening news from the president, from the Speaker of the House, some days I'm challenged to think we can get there, but I think there's just too much at stake for too many people in this country. We've got so many folks that are looking at this clip, but also looking at how they're going to feed their families every day, how they're going to continue to pay their mortgages. There's just too much at stake for them to go over the cliff. So I'm hoping that come January 1, you don't think back and say, Walter stood before us and said he thought this was going to work out. Well, what an idiot. You might say I'm an idiot, but just know it wasn't about that. Folks, it's great to be with you today. I'm honored to be able to talk with you about our 21st Century Commission report. More importantly, I would like to also publicly commend the Maryland Community Colleges for the great work you do. Your statewide commitment to completion, student success, it has been observed from around the country. I often mention it when I'm speaking with other states about statewide commitments to this big goal we have of having more completers, more degrees, more certificates, and you guys are doing great work here. This is impressive to come to Maryland and see all 16 colleges, 400 people focused on the same important discussion. And I want to set the tone today by talking a little bit about our commission report, because that's why we did the report, for this very purpose. I'd also be remiss if I didn't also thank Dr. Pollard and Professor Lara for participating on our 21st Century Commission. How about a hand for the two of them? They really represented your state very well. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but equally important to me was really the third phase of this 21st Century Initiative, and that's the implementation work we're doing. We've got 110 presidents, chancellors, faculty members, trustees, and others that are involved in the implementation work, because for me, it was, if you think about it from this standpoint, the easy work was really pulling a lot of bright people together and asking them to be very, very bold in their thinking, coming up with some bold ideas, and hopefully you've got those 7 recommendations in your hands now. But the really hard work is really what happens on those 1,167 two-year college campuses across America as we start to transform them. And that's why I'm thrilled to have Caroline Williams from Baltimore City, Sandra Kurtinitis from here in Baltimore County, and a few and Jennifer Lara, who's co-chairing one of the teams involved in that. We've got 110 presidents and others, as I said before, 9 teams and a steering committee, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Let's get started here now and talk a little bit about what we have. As I've said before, and I think Sandra said it very well, best of times, worst of times. I like to call them unprecedented times. I've been in this business now almost 40 years, and 14 of those years were right here in Maryland. Learned a lot and fought a lot of good battles here with a lot of good colleagues and folks who have been lifelong friends to me. But we've had a lot of good things happening for us. Never in my lifetime did I dream we would ever get the kind of notoriety that we're getting for community colleges as we're getting today. You noted here that I said something about, I'm speaking about the State of the Union speech, the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. For some of you in the room, you might not appreciate this comment. There was a time when you didn't see community colleges and excellence in the same sentence. So this is very significant when you see an organization like the Aspen Institute recognizing community colleges. Now, the metrics right, I don't get into that. We don't pick the winners. I need to say that up front because, boy, I've had people call me and want to know, Walter, why wasn't this college? Why wasn't this state represented? Those are not choices we make. We advise them on some of the metrics, and quite frankly, we had some disagreement over those. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a positive when you can have colleges recognized at the White House, the Press Club for excellence, and they're getting ready to do that again very, very soon. The White House Summit and the regional summits on community colleges were all significant. With that increased visibility, though, has come increased scrutiny. Folks, our graduation rates aren't what they should be. Our completion rates aren't what they should be. We know that. We acknowledge that. And I'm also very pleased to see folks being very transparent about what they're doing in their institutions and acknowledging the fact that they have got to improve and they're going to improve. When you read the report, and I trust that a number of you in the room have done that, we took on some very tough issues. In fact, we worked for almost a year debating and having very robust discussions. And I hope not to say robust again. I'm going to say the R word rather than say robust because I think we use that word much too often. But we look at a number of things. We looked at a number of areas that we needed to talk about improving, and that was one of them. You note that 43 states have fewer dollars in their higher education budgets today than they did last year. 17 states have moved towards performance-based funding. And I like to say we now have more mission and fewer resources. This slide here, and I'm going to run through this in the 10 minutes that I was given, pretty much hopefully none of this is new for you. You all recognize the fact that 46% of the undergraduates in America are in community colleges. 80% of the credentialed first responders are developed and trained by your institutions. A little bit about the institutions across the country. In 2012, we have 1,167 colleges. If you can read the legend over here to your left, it would show you when most of those colleges got started. I heard a guy talking about Montgomery and Hagerstown, so that would have been in, I assume, the 50s or 60s, and you'll note how many colleges were started then. We serve 13 million students in our nation's community colleges, 5 million on the non-credit side and 8 million on the credit side. And all of that work is important. All of that work counts, and I think Dr. Kurtinitis made that comment earlier. We contribute greatly to the health of America. I like to say we represent that on-ramp to the middle class. And we're thrilled about that. 59% of the students are part-time, 41% are full-time. And if you were to look at this from a gender standpoint, it's almost about 59% female. And if you thought about this 30 years ago, I looked at these figures 30 years ago, it would have probably been maybe the exact opposite. Some of the focus for AACC over the next year, we're looking at our legislative priorities, as we just spoke about with this fiscal cliff discussion. But the completion agenda in the 21st century implementation will probably be our greatest priority because we think that has most impact. The voluntary framework of accountability, and I hope most of you are familiar with the VFA. I can touch on that later if you'd like. But leadership development, our veterans initiative, cybersecurity, and some of you may know I serve on the Homeland Security Advisory Task Force, and we had a meeting this week to talk about cybersecurity. And I was thrilled to be able to do a little research, and of the colleges that I was able to identify, a number of the colleges were right here in Maryland. And so you're going to be hearing from Secretary Napolitano's office, a few of you, about that. If you have an outstanding cybersecurity program, email me or touch base with me before I get out of the building today, because I'd sure like to be able to promote your program and your college. I got a quick little, I call it a joke, I hope you find it that way, but I am serious about what this slide talks about. It says, we are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist using technologies that haven't been invented in order to serve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. I use this to speak to the challenge and the conundrum that many of our college presidents have, developing training for programs that for jobs that don't yet exist. We're asked to better align our training with workforce needs, and in many cases we don't know what those needs are yet. We have to buy technology, we have to invest. And I would draw your attention to the bottom of this slide where you see the YouTube, look right above it. That says shift happens, S-H-I-F-T. I would never come here to Baltimore and use a bad word for you, okay? Setting the stage a little bit about this commission, you see that we represent our own ramp to the middle class. I won't read that to you. You know the challenges. Student success rates are very unacceptably low is the way I'd like to phrase that. We have some poor handoffs between high schools, colleges, and even universities. The primary reason that most of us got into this discussion about student success, other than the fact it was the right discussion at the right time to have, is that we were challenged by the President of the United States to return the U.S. to our rightful place in the world order of having more high school, college, and university graduate certificates and diplomas than anybody else in the world. We had fallen to 16th or 17th, and I think we're climbing back. When I hear about what's happening in Maryland and now the other 49 states, I'm encouraged by the feedback we're getting. This 21st century approach that I took on has three phases. One, a listening tour. Secondly, the commission that I've referenced. And third, the implementation piece. I started with the listening tour when I came on board in January of 2011. Thrilled to be able to say that I had an opportunity to visit with over 1,300 people across the United States, listening to them about their challenges, their opportunities. I had a chance to spend time in Maryland in that January I came on board, and hearing from some of you and some of your trustees about issues that were important in Maryland. I had a chance to visit a number of cities during the course of 2011. I had a chance to visit a number of states. In fact, I visited the 2 New York states. If you haven't been to Cooney and SUNY, you don't know what visiting 2 New York states are like, but it's literally 2 states. And when you go to California, you have to go to Southern and to Northern California. Don Lindsay, I see you back there. Good to see you, and you understand what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, we had a chance to visit with a number of people, and the listening tour report is on our website should you want to read that. When I brought the commission together, we had sort of a twofold mandate. We've got a mission in community colleges that we've held for over 100 years, and that's the valuing and the appreciation of student access. The challenge has been, how do we take the access piece that we've done remarkably well and now turn that into more graduates, more student success stories? You may have heard the story about what happened in Texas recently, where some business group bought billboards in Austin and in Dallas. The billboard in Austin read something like this: Austin Community College has a 4% graduation rate. Is that a great use of your taxpayer dollars? Now, I think we've got 16 presidents here. How would you like to read a billboard out on 95 or 295 or 40 or whatever and see that outside your office one day? Richard Rhodes, president of Austin Community College, had a perfect retort though. He bought a big ad in the Austin American Statesman, and the retort went something like this: I want to speak to the billboard that's up in front of our college where it says we have a 4% graduation rate. He went on to say, the 4% figure, however, is not correct. The real graduation rate is 3.9. But then he went on to talk about the wonderful things that Austin Community College does in terms of its transfer programs with the University of Texas and other schools. 80% of the folks that are nurses and first responders in the city of Austin are trained at Austin Community College. And all the folks that the college contributes rather, to the workforce. Let me suffice it to say, his editorial was very well received, and I think it killed that. Wright Laster did something similar in Dallas. But these are the challenges that we've had. The essence of the report, we speak to the fact that the dream is at risk and that we need a more highly educated population. Sandra referenced the 3 R's, and I do want you to hopefully read this report because it does speak to the need we have to redesign, reinvent, and reset the system. And those words were picked very carefully for a lot of good reasons, and I'm thinking our panelists will speak to that today. We've got 3 R's, 7 recommendations, and 22 strategies. In fact, when I go out around the country speaking, and I'll give you another, let me digress for another minute. I did a commencement speech in Illinois at Waubonsee Community College. If any of you have been to Illinois, you might be familiar with that Chicago suburb. But at any rate, we had dinner with the board after the speech, and I'm sitting there with the board members, and I had one board member bring out the report, and he said, I understand, my president gave us a homework assignment. That was to read your report. I said, thank you very much, sir. He said, on page 37, you said, I said, whoa. I said, so I have had to, and I do, carry my iPad with me every day. I got my report, and that's why Dr. Rawls did the 7 recommendations. So now, any place I go, I got my recommendations, I can speak to them, and I got my report. So Dr. Kurtinitis said I could call on any of you in this room today, and you would be prepared to stand up and talk to me about the report. Is that true? I guess not. Okay, let me keep going. Not yet. Oh, not yet, okay. But we've got a steering committee that's made up of 36 folks, 24 team leaders, and 9 work groups that are working on this plan. This is a framework if you really want to think about how this implementation work is going to take place. Some of the most exciting work in America we've now had 6 of the teams meet. 5 of the teams met last Friday and Saturday morning. And I was thrilled with the kinds of discussions that were taking place across the hotel. But you can see the 9 teams and how they relate to the 7 recommendations and also how they feed into the steering committee. Let me also say to you in the room, and we've really been fortunate to have Jen Lara and her leadership with our faculty group because we believe it's so important that our faculty are very, very involved in how we approach the implementation piece. Trustees are involved, obviously presidents and other leaders in colleges. But if you've got any ideas or any thoughts about this, feel free to email me. And I promise you, I get about 150 emails a day, but I promise you I'll get back to you. It may not be in the 24 hours I like to communicate, but I will get back to you, because I would appreciate your thoughts and so forth. How has the report been received to date? And I don't want to, screw this up. We released the report in April in Orlando at our conference. To date, I've not had 1 criticism of the report. Rather, I have had hundreds of emails and phone calls and letters about how this report challenges us. We and the members of the committee are here. We thought we were very bold in our thinking, but one thing this report does, if you read it, it complements the extraordinary work being done on our college campuses. I like to refer to it as the hardest work in America, the work that you do, but the most important work in America. Then we go on to talk about, but with that, we need to do a little bit better job. And I think the fact that people are focused now on completion, focused on how we can do student success better. And we don't want to give up on access. That's still a staple of community colleges. But I believe it doesn't have to be either or. I think it can be both and I'm thrilled with that. You'll see here today, over 135 colleges use this report as a part of their fall convocation, professional development programs, and other strategic initiatives. And I was talking with Sandra as we were preparing for today, and she told me, well, we did it in Baltimore County as well. We had one college that ordered 1,400 of the reports so that they could give it to board members, faculty members, staff members, and others across a 3-college district. We've got 11 university professors that are using this report as a part of their syllabus for their community college leadership and higher education programs. I talked about VFA, Pennsylvania has adopted it, and I could go on and on and on talking about some of the positive ways in which this report has been adopted. We've got next steps, members of the commission and now the implementation teams. We're going around the country talking about this report, much like today, and I'm thrilled every time I get an opportunity to get before our leaders and talk about that. We've disseminated the report, and we're doing broad outreach. Lastly, I would say to you, we're creating what we're calling a 21st Century Center that will be housed at AACC. It'll be virtual, and we're looking at ways in which we can provide professional development, technical assistance to colleges that need more help in this regard. Before I do a benediction and we pass a plate this morning, I want to also give you my contact information should you wish to contact me. And so I'm going to be back with you today facilitating and moderating the panel, and I think it's my job now to ask Dr. Pollard to please come up. Thank you all very much for being good on this.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I am delighted to be here, and I first want to start by, again, thanking Dr. Kurtinitis and the CCBC team for what they do every year when we come here. It's amazing to me to watch the orchestration, but know that it comes from an authentic place. So I really want to thank you all for the fellowship that you promote here. And I also want to thank Dr. Bumphus for giving me the opportunity to have served on the commission for several reasons. And I'll talk a little bit about that momentarily. But I also want to thank the colleagues who I got to serve and got to meet and spend time with, and look forward to their leadership as we implement this plan. I have a couple of comments to offer. The task that Sandra gave me was to frame, I believe, what the panel will be talking about here later. This afternoon, and we move into our sessions, you'll hear a lot about how our institutions are responding to the completion agenda. But what's very interesting, you'll also hear from the panelists who'll be following me, they're going to be talking about how our state is responding to these issues, and I think in a very proactive and deliberate manner. But my job is really to maybe do what I like to do best, is maybe pose a few questions or maybe offer a few provocative ideas for you to think about. 2 points frame my comments. One is a great quote that I heard, and I'm still unpacking every time I say it. Higher education was a movement before it was a set of institutions to be managed. Higher education was a movement before it was a set of institutions to be managed. So that leaves me with a question as I think about that. Can we be both a movement and a set of well-managed, dynamic, responsive, and relevant organizations because we adapt, innovate, and enhance American competitiveness while advancing our critical mission within the higher education landscape? Can both of those identities exist, and can they be mutually supportive in advancing the mission and also meeting the very critical times that our country and maybe in our globe demands of us? If you think about that point, then there's a second one that resonates with me even more closely. Last night I had the opportunity to have an inaugural group start at President's Roundtable in Montgomery County, where I have a series of CEOs who are coming to meet with me probably I'll probably say twice a year, and come and talk to me about issues that are facing corporate America. And I had Norman Augenstein, former president of Lockheed Martin there. I had representatives from Marriott and Chevy Chase Bank, that's now Capital One, and we're having a wonderful dialogue. And what was very interesting about this, they gave me a couple of good points, again, framing the comments I'm going to say momentarily. They believe that this is the community college's time. In fact, Norman Augenstein went as far to say that he believes that this is our moment in history, because we work on the skills gap that's facing this country. He also talked about that our access mission is so critical, and because we respond to the new immigrants who come to this country, and because of our career and technical education, and because we serve students who are truly motivated. He had this great quote. He said, "Motivation will best sheer talent every time." Motivation will best sheer talent every time. So if you think about that in those terms, they then, though, while they were giving me great accolades about what community colleges are doing and what Montgomery College is doing, they went on, though, to kind of pose, and I'm going to try and summarize their question this way. They said, higher education is in the midst of an evolutionary moment. Evolutionary moment. American students are underperforming against our global partners in just about every subject. American competitiveness is down. Our global partners in just about every subject are advancing us, and America has a shrinking workforce in the time when we can least afford that to be the case. And they said to me, almost to a person, yet it seems that higher education is a little resistant to looking at what the issues really are and how to adapt the organizations. In fact, they asked the question, how are we adapting and evolving so that we can stay transformative and dynamic in the midst of these global shifts that are happening more swiftly than any of us have been prepared to respond to? Now, mind you, that's just a little think tank, a small sample, but I think many of us hear these types of comments in the media quite frequently as you look at the trade papers of higher education and education in general. So with that context, let me make a few points about this report. For the most part, we already know what we do well. As Dr. Bumphus said earlier, we know what we need to do as well, though. The report, in my opinion, was not groundbreaking in that regard. What it did, though, is that it took these points and it synthesized them in a way that made it accessible to us. There are very few things that we haven't talked about on our college campuses. When I look at the minutes from the affinity groups, you're talking about that in the affinity groups. We're talking about it over teas and we go to national conversations. But the interesting part, and a few of us got a little ticked off by some of the folks who kind of tried to take the message and co-opt it and turn it into something different in the media. But what was very interesting is that we were defining our own narrative. We were taking the opportunity as a community college sector to say, this is our moment, this is our story. We know what we do well, we know what we need to enhance, and we're willing to name it and we're willing to own it. So if that's indeed the case, I would offer that it takes both courage and consciousness to do that. And I celebrate our ability to do both. We demonstrated great courage and consciousness by being very reflective and capturing these ideas. And as we think about how we go about implementing this work, that to me is where the true growth will occur. The report makes clear that the core competencies for community colleges in the future will be capacity building, timely and even unanticipated responses and redesigns to things that we don't even know that are happening. I love that quote you have earlier that I think is very powerful to think about how indeed do we begin to prepare for a future that we don't even necessarily see or know yet, but yet and still we're being called to do that. How do we begin to have substantive transformation of our students that advance the needs of our students themselves, their families, our communities, our country, and even our globe? So hence, for me, when I think about this report, redesign is suggested is about organizational, employee, and leadership capacity building, while acknowledging that there are some who simply don't know what we do and how well we do it. Our job is to use the evidence to support that. So for me, I see several next steps in this. One, we have to engage in critical dialogue. Why do they, our critics, think this way about us? Secondly, how do we engage in courageous reflection to celebrate our strengths and what we do very well, to approach this from an abundance model? Engage, thirdly, in courageous reflection and acknowledge our weak areas and our growth potential. That means that we have to advance such tools that we have in our state, such as the degree progress model, which reflects both the breadth and the depth of what we do as community colleges. For me, the dinner I had last night almost is playing back and forth in my head as I thought about the comments this earlier, redesign, reinvent, reset. But what I thought was interesting is that I'm left thinking about how we build capacity within our organizations where the stress of change has to equally be met with a sense of urgency for the future. So I apologize to my Montgomery College colleagues in the room because you've heard me say this several times, but I think the best way to explain this is a way a good friend of mine does. He explained to me that his wife is a cardiac nurse. And as a cardiac nurse, he started having a few heart problems, and he would go up the stairs and be a little winded and couldn't figure out what's going on. It was taking him a couple hours. Well, that was his story, probably a couple minutes to, catch his breath and, heal from all the sweating he was doing at that particular time. And his wife, said, well, honey, cardiac health isn't really measured by your stress level in the midst of the activity. Cardiac health is really measured in the recovery, how your heart recovers after the experience. So the goal for good cardiac health is not to have these moments of change and stress where your cardiac numbers go so out of control and then it takes you forever to recover, right? The goal is to have those stressors come and then you recover quickly, because stress is inevitable. Change is inevitable. How we respond to it, though, is the sign of true organizational health. So I love that, because when I think about it as an organization, how do we begin to prepare ourselves for the inevitable stress that will come to us time and time and time again? How do we begin to respond to the people who don't necessarily know what we do, but yet have a commentary about it? I always love it. It's a great quote I heard. People often exercise the right of opinion without the right of thought, right? So if we think about the work we have to do, I would offer it takes courage. It also takes us the opportunity to name it and be thoughtful about that, but also to think about the recovery in such a way that transformation, redesign, reinvention, resetting is expected and perhaps even embraced within our organizations more readily than it is now. You will hear throughout the day how individual institutions are responding to this in the state of Maryland. I would offer to you, I believe, as Dr. Bumphus said earlier, we are certainly a state that is premier in leading the conversation on these issues, I think with courage and tenacity. And I also think that we're going to have wonderful examples about how we're doing this with our colleagues as they speak right behind me. I'd like to end my comments with a great quote. I had this card. A friend of mine went to a conference, and I love the poet Audre Lorde. And she had this great quote: "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then I become less and less important whether I am afraid." And I would argue here that the type of courage that we're demonstrating as a community college system means that we're less and less worried about fear and more courage, being courageous and actualizing the mission of our institutions. And I'm so proud to be a part of Maryland in doing that. With that, I have the pleasure of introducing one of the state leaders who is helping us figure out how to do this in very different ways. Dr. Sharon Pierce, who is at Howard Community College, serves there as Chief Academic Officer. Also this year is serving as the convener and the chair of the Chief Academic Officers Affinity Group, and I'll call Sharon to the stage.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here this morning, and I'm particularly happy to be in Maryland and not in Texas. And I hate to pick on Texas from anybody that's from Texas, but I was there yesterday, and their lieutenant governor came to a forum of thought leaders to speak. And this was a group of thought leaders in higher education, about half of whom were not from the state of Texas. And I do not believe that any elected official in Maryland would come to a group of higher education leaders and talk about the needs for water, the need for roads, and then brag about the fact that they are like number 48 out of 50 in the amount of money they spend on education. So for those reasons, I am very happy to be in Maryland. This morning, we've already heard a couple of recurring themes about how we've been called to action by the president, by our governor, and by our own presidents, our college presidents, who set a goal that we would produce more graduates. And I'm very proud to say that we've started to meet that goal. We've exceeded the goals we originally set, and most of us are working towards setting new goals. But for community colleges, this renewed focus on completion and degree attainment has created some tension. And the tension, we've already noted it, comes from our attempt to seek balance between all the aspects of our complex mission. We want to provide educational pathways that lead to graduation, but also to successful transfer to four-year institutions, and we can't forget our commitment to develop a strong and robust workforce. Maryland institutions are leading the nation and have made some very remarkable progress, but there is more to do. And so when I was asked to speak, one of the things that I was tasked to do was to remind us of some of the things we are doing very successfully, but also put forth some of the challenges for ourselves and for our partners. So we're committed to improving. We're committed to strategic change management, and we've already started to implement a comprehensive model or approach based on best practices. But one of our challenges is being able to benchmark our progress in a way that goes beyond simple measurement. We need to get better, but we need more than just results data in order to improve. We need actionable improvement data that focuses on granular level success drivers. So that's our challenge, to find that type of data and to implement it. In order to do that, we need help. We need access to a longitudinal data set that is inclusive of all of our students and provides information that can be mined to inform our action plans. That would be invaluable. We can't afford to ignore the large population of part-time students and of students that swirl. We know a lot about first-time, full-time freshmen, but we need to know more. So when we are focusing on that group, we can't focus on that group to the exclusion of others. As we seek to implement these strategies on a culture of evidence, we need to be mindful of avoiding the pitfalls of early medical research and practice. And we've already talked about cardiacs, and we're just going to take it a little bit step further. When doctors first begin to study and learn and try and build all of their treatment plans for coronary artery disease, they were all based on a population of middle-aged white men. And so they had to figure out why these strategies did not work for women or for minorities. It was because they had this wonderful, robust information that was very effective for the group that they studied. So we want to make sure that our solutions are not based on a small set that don't represent our entire student population or that answer to our entire mission. We can't forget those students. They are a huge part of our mission, but we need to make sure that we are open and inclusive and that we are flexible. And we need to be aware that one size does not fit all. So our solutions need to be for part-time students. We also need to be able to distinguish between students who are in remediation and students who are college or career ready. And again, I cannot emphasize enough that we need to be mindful of that swirling effect. Maryland has made a conscious effort to address the needs of our developmental education students. And we've worked on redesign, we've worked on revamping, we've got some wonderful projects that are in progress, and we're going to hear about those this afternoon. We've got modified Emporium models being done in Cecil County. We've got accelerated learning projects. CCBC has put forth a model that has just been replicated across the country, and we're all learning lessons from those models, and those are part of the best practices that we are implementing. But there is still more work to do. But it is one of our success stories. The data is not where we want it to be. We aren't getting the results that we're hoping for yet, but we're making progress and we're well on the way. I'd like to spend just a moment talking about transfer and general education requirements. We're working with our four-year partners on changes that we need in regulation to help our students as they transfer. And I'm looking forward to hearing the report from the intersegmental chief academic officers in January. That was the date that they promised, and they are on task, and we are looking forward to those reports. But that's another area that we can't do alone. That requires cooperation and partnership and collaboration from the four-year institutions as well as the regulatory bodies and the accrediting bodies that we work with. So we want to make sure that we help and promote policies that soften or create a way that just open up the pathways for those students who do swirl, and that take down the barriers that for resources and the barriers that help keep our students from progressing as quickly as we want to, and barriers that make them lose velocity. When students graduate in the spring to transfer to a four-year institution, and they aren't able to enroll until the following spring because of policies and barriers that we've put in place in the state, then we need to pay attention to that. So, those are a couple of our challenges. But there are so many things that we are doing well. And as I said, I am so happy to be in Maryland because we all are aware of these issues and challenges, but we work very closely with our partners. And I am enthusiastic and I am hopeful and positive about where we're going. We want to continue to work on promoting the value of the associate degree. We need to make sure that our constituents and our partners understand how valuable that degree is. The one thing that I'd like to close with and just say this is that we need to remember that our institutions are colleges of choice, not default. Thank you. I forgot to introduce our follow-up speaker, and that's Professor Jen Lara. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. Every time I come to this campus, I always feel so welcomed, so thank you. It just feels like home, especially with all the lights twinkling around the trees. So before I get started, I'd like to just see a show of hands. How many of you have taught at a community college, either somewhere along your career or maybe you're currently teaching? Show of hands. Wow, I like it. Okay, thank you. And then just so I can differentiate, can I see a show of hands of those folks who are currently teaching, either full or part-time, credit or non-credit, currently teaching? That's almost the same amount. Awesome, thank you. So today I'd like to talk about the 21st Century Report and faculty engagement to increase student success and completion. I put together a rough equation of that topic, and it looks a little bit like this. By the way, my husband can't believe, he's an engineer, that I would put an equation that looks like this on a slide with a pink background and share it with a group of people. He was mortified when I showed him this. Yeah, and I said, well, that's why I'm a teacher, not an engineer. I was fortunate to be on the 21st Century Commission who authored the report, and I feel very close to it. It's a little geeky, but I carry the report in my bag every single day, and I refer to it. And that's why I like those new little cards, because it'll make my life easier. Dr. Bumphus over here to my side also invited me to co-chair one of the implementation teams related to the report, and thank you for doing that. Last week, our team had our first face-to-face meeting in DC to discuss our team's focus, which is to engage faculty in student success and completion. Again, I was sharing this with my husband, our team's focus, and what we were dialoguing about, and he was a bit surprised. He said, "Aren't faculty already engaged in student success and completion? Isn't that your job?" And I said, well, yes, okay? Because from my faculty perspective and from what I know about faculty engagement, faculty really span the continuum in their engagement in this conversation. And really any topic for that matter, we span the continuum. You have on one end of the continuum faculty who are eager to change, eager to make improvements, eager to take risks even. I've heard that side of the continuum described as the Christianity model of faculty engagement, where you start with the disciples first. On the other end of the continuum, we have faculty who are thinking, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years or more. And here's my rough sketch of what that looks like. My guess is all of you, whether you're faculty or an ally, fit somewhere on that continuum. By the way, Paul really hated this slide. But when I go back to my husband's question, aren't faculty already engaged in this conversation? I think about my faculty brethren and myself. Faculty, full and part-time, credit and non-credit, are engaged in teaching and learning. We are engaged with our students on a daily and weekly basis. Faculty spend the most time with our students on campus, but I do have one aside. I know our student activities director is here today. Chris Storch, where are you? There she is. Give her a round of applause, that woman. And here's why. I think I spend a lot of time with students. I think Chris beats me, okay? She is with students all the time. But for faculty, we tend to focus on our classes. How is a student doing in our class? And that makes sense, right? Especially makes sense for our part-time faculty who are hired to teach a course. Faculty don't oftentimes, or not often, we don't necessarily delve into how a student is doing in all of their classes or in their degree, certificate, or training programs overall. It kind of makes me think of this video.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Thank you, Eric. Do you see what I mean? When faculty or any other college employee or a college initiative focuses on just one variable, like most of you did while watching that video, there's a danger of not seeing the student, the whole student, and that student's movement towards student success and completion. The 21st Century Report says no more. The report explicitly says it's time to move from individual faculty prerogative to collective responsibility for student success. It takes a village metaphor to another level. In fact, my entire focus has changed since the report was released. I used to say for well over a decade, I teach, what's your superpower? But I now borrow the mantra of Butler Community College in Kansas, The spirit of their mantra goes something like this: finish what you start. If I know a student came to my classroom to finish a class, I say, let's finish it. If I know a student came to our college to complete a credential or a degree, let's finish it. And if I know a student came to our college to take 2 classes before they transfer to a university, I say, let's get you done so then you can transfer. Let's finish what you start. But in order to do that, in order to support students in completing their goals, which, by the way, the data from the Sensi survey shows our students do come with goals. They don't just arrive at our doorstep with empty aspirations. Almost 80% of our community college students aspire to obtain a degree. Over 70% of our community college students aspire to transfer, and almost 60% of our students aspire to earn a certificate. So in order to help our students finish what they start, we need to move, and I quote from the report, we need to move from a culture of isolation to a culture of collaboration. We need to help students holistically, and we need to help them finish what they start, period. Which brings up the question, what can faculty do? How can full and part-time, credit and non-credit faculty engage in this conversation about student success and completion? And I want that conversation to turn out to be influential. I have 3 big ideas that are steeped in the report. First, we have an opportunity to engage all faculty in this conversation. Since part-time faculty members teach a tremendous amount of community college classes, we need to embrace the one college, one faculty spirit. There is no them and us. Our students do not differentiate nor care if their professor teaches full or part-time, credit or non-credit, or has full benefits or not. To a community college student, every employee on campus represents college. Along with this, we need to recognize faculty and their allies span the continuum and their interests with regard to student success and completion and their actions. We have our naysayers to our disciples and everything in between. Second, we need to voice what we've been thinking for years. We know what students need, and we've let the naysayers and tradition get in the way of what is necessary and essential for student success and completion. We know students need to attend a mandatory informative orientation. You cannot register for classes until you've attended. And I'd love them to demonstrate they learned something during that orientation too. Along with that, our students need to meet with an advisor who specializes in their specific degree program. And I know right now what you're thinking. You're thinking, our college offers both of those, an orientation and advising services. But I've looked at the data nationwide. Only 38% of community colleges across the nation hold students to attending an orientation, and about 50% of our students use advising services. We also know that students need to brush up on their skills before taking their placement tests. Nationwide, the data shows only 13% of community colleges require a refresher experience before taking a placement test, and less than 44% of community colleges nationwide even offer a refresher option. I remember last year at this summit, I attended a presentation by a community college here in Maryland who was playing around with offering a summer refresher course for their students. Guess what? Their initial results showed that students, on average, saved an entire year of developmental education classes just by refreshing for 1 week. What else do we know? We know that attendance in class is positively correlated to higher student success and achievement. The data nationwide shows over 75% of community colleges require attendance. I think that's a fantastic step in the right direction. My department has a mandatory attendance policy. Many allied health programs do as well. A lovely example of this is from Lake Area Technical Institute in South Dakota. That college leads the nation with one of the highest graduation rates at 76%. Attendance at Lake Area is required in all courses, as they believe we can't teach students if they're not here. We know this. Our students need to be here or virtually here if it's an online class. Additionally, we need to voice what we wholeheartedly know and remember. our community colleges offer too many options for students. When I think back to my degrees from Michigan State, University of Colorado, and Johns Hopkins, I remember very few, if any, choices. Yes, I got to choose my major, but after that, all my courses, the order in which I took them, the cohort for which I completed those courses with, and when I met with my advisor was all prescribed and required. Because we have an open door policy and mission in our community colleges, which we do need to continue and protect, doesn't mean we have to offer our students an unlimited buffet of overwhelming choices. As an aside, my department has said enough is enough. With the full support of our dean, next semester, all education majors in my department in their introductory education classes are required to complete a multimedia-infused, mandatory online orientation with built-in assessments. We are going to hold our students accountable for that information. And we've changed all of our prerequisites in our education courses, which now require students to take their coursework in a specific, intentional order with very few choices. The third and last takeaway is really the essence of the 21st Century Report. We need to see beyond. We need to see old environments in new ways. We need to demand new models of support for faculty and staff, like Austin Community College's Instructional Coach Program, where they have a trained instructional coach who is a faculty member in every single department. Or at my college, we have the Academy of Excellence program, where faculty support each other in developing, maintaining, and teaching online courses. We need to rethink how students spend time at our brick and mortar and virtual campuses. We need to consider flipped classrooms, reinventing office hours, establishing more cohort and learning communities, and replace traditional and paper pencil assessments with juicy, project-based collaborative learning that has market value. Since our best practices in community colleges aren't so best, or our graduation rates would be a bit higher, we need to shake up the snow globe and edu-gauge students. I love that word, edu-gauge. In closing, the 21st Century Report demands that everyone making decisions on behalf of students be engaged in their most effective work. It is time for faculty, full and part-time, credit and non-credit, to unite as one teaching and learning force. It is time to take action on what we know is necessary and essential for student success. It is time to see beyond and champion students to finish what they start. Thank you. Thanks so much. I'd now like to invite Dr. Midcap to the stage. He is Vice President of Student Support Services at Chesapeake College.
It seems like it's always my luck that I follow the presenter who has the video of the moonwalking bear. I would like to thank the Maryland Association of Community Colleges for conducting the 3rd annual MACC Completion Summit. I would also like to thank Dr. Bumphus for facilitating this panel discussion today and CCBC for hosting today's event. Community colleges were founded to extend the American dream by expanding access to higher education. While returning World War II veterans studying on the GI Bill provided the original impetus for the creation of many community colleges, the mission soon extended to ensuring upward mobility through educational opportunities for lower and mid-class families. National leaders understood the strong connection between education and a broad-based prosperity, and community colleges played a vital role in creating the world's most educated workforce. Now, AACC declares that the mission has changed from extending the American dream to helping reclaim it. Accustomed to leading the world in college completion rates, the U.S. is now 16th in college completion in the critical 25 to 34-year-old age group. Nearly half of all Americans have either fallen into poverty or have earnings that classify them as low income, according to AACC. And a child born poor in the United States today is more likely to remain poor than at any time in our country's history. The AACC report says community colleges are both part of the problem and part of the solution. The report pulls no punches in identifying where it believes community colleges are failing. It cites low student success rates, dysfunctional developmental education, inadequate student and academic support services, uninformed career planning, unsuccessful student preparation for job market opportunities, incoherent educational pathways, and disconnects in both the high school to community college transition and the community college to baccalaureate institution transition. How many of you bristled at least a little bit as I read off the list of charges leveled at community college performance? How many of you thought about the challenges we face every day as community college practitioners? Underprepared students, inadequate funding, undersized staffs, a maze of state and federal regulations, and bureaucratic hurdles to seamless transitions with other segments of higher education. And I'm sure many of you also thought about the incredible commitment of our faculty and staff to bring students and the zeal with which they attempt to fulfill the community college mission. Yet we also know that we have to get better at the bottom line, supporting students in the successful completion of their academic programs and preparing them for a global workforce. The student services practitioners I represent as the CSAO's chair this year are committed to the spirit of the AACC report. We are already implementing many of the reforms that Reclaiming the American Dream advocates. Student services divisions around the state are launching programs that feature new students receiving more intrusive advising, a more structured first-year experience, less ability to opt out of important activities such as new student orientation, and an end to the practice of late registration. Colleges are launching earlier, more systematic interventions with students encountering academic difficulties and providing a greater level of support to students on probation and warning or returning from academic suspension. Many of our colleges are expanding dual enrollment not to attract more of the high-achieving students, but because a host of recent studies have shown that first-generation and low-income students are more likely to graduate from high school, transition to a four-year college, and persistent post-secondary education if they participate in dual enrollment. Our colleges are engaging on a more systematic basis with our service region high schools to ensure better prepared students, using strategies such as earlier placement testing to identify skill deficiencies, and better placement test preparation so that students can either shorten their time in remediation or avoid it entirely. And our colleges are working with our four-year partners so that more seamless transfer and more uniform reverse transfer can more quickly be realized. With all that said, we know there's much more that needs to be done to meet the national need for more community college graduates. We must become even more engaged in working with our public school systems to assist in student preparation and in identifying alternative pathways for students who place at the lower end of our placement scores. We should also consider whether every student needs a placement test or if there's a more comprehensive way to evaluate an incoming student's experience so that students are not unnecessarily placed in developmental coursework. Many of the barriers that our students face are bureaucratic in nature. The COMAR limit on maximum credits allowed for prior learning is one example of a regulation that seems to work against college completion. Ever-increasing and often cumbersome state and federal reporting requirements also indirectly impact completion negatively. Some of the staff hours used to meet reporting mandates in many offices, financial aid, Veterans Affairs, and registration, to name just three, would be better deployed in activities that directly support the success of our veterans, our financial aid recipients, and our other students. This conference is important for many reasons, starting with the need to celebrate our best practices in completion and to discuss other ways to improve completion rates. I appreciate being included in this discussion, which I'm sure will spark ongoing conversations. I would now like to invite the rest of our panelists to join me on stage. Thank you.
Folks, good morning again. We've got about 15 minutes that I understand we have available for you. We've thrown a lot at you this morning, but we'd like to entertain any questions that you all might have. Can I get you to give this panel one more hand? They did a fabulous job. Thank you guys very much. I took a lot of copious notes myself. So if the audience don't have any questions, I've got 3 or 4 myself that I'm going to pose of you. But are there any questions from any? Oh, I see a hand out here. Those folks who ask the questions first and foremost and are considered to be the best and brightest, we've got awards for you this morning too, okay? So up here, I think we've got some folks that have microphones or?
We've got some students in there getting the microphones.
Students are getting the microphones.
We can get started just by.
We can get shouted out if you don't mind.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. This is amazing, the information, and a lot to digest. But throughout the conversation, I always think about the parents. Parents are critical in the sense of supporting that child or that youth to be successful in the long run. Now, my question is about the immigrant parents, that they don't understand the system, they don't have the background that many of us have, that they don't understand how to support. I saw you great understanding agenda, but I really would like to place that thought. And I'm not sure that you have those discussions, but I wanted to have it open. The importance of keeping that information flowing, and it had to be in several languages. That's the drawback here, because not all of them are engaged in learning the language yet. I know they want to, but I think it is the work for us to engage the communities that are impacted by.
That's an excellent question, and basic. Could everyone hear the question? Okay, I think everyone did. But it was about the parents, immigrant parents more specifically, and how this report more or less, and even some of the initiatives we got, how do we address and embrace some of this new diversity we have, and in some cases it's not new diversity, just the diversity of some of our colleges. Let me turn to our panel. Would anyone over here like to take a first crack at that?
Well, I would probably be remiss if I didn't take the first crack. Good morning, Trustee Blackwell. I am delighted to.
Uh-oh, you must know that questioner. Okay.
But I'm honored to do so because I know she has a passion about this issue, and we talk about it quite frequently in our own institution. The idea of talking about the pipeline of education is critical. And one of the things that we're looking a lot at Montgomery College is how do we take the work we do directly into the community. One of the things we have done exceptionally well at our institution for many years is to bring people to the institution. 60,000 students since 1946. Most recently, in this past year, have come to Montgomery College, and we spent a lot of time bringing them in to have services. But what we're finding, and we're seeing more of this, whether it be in our phenomenal ESL programs, our GED workforce development, but also the ways in which we choose to engage the community, how do we take what we do directly into the community and meet people where they are? And then create a pipeline from their community to the college and have that be not just a pipeline to the college, but a pipeline from the college to the community. You'll hear later in the program, we're launching a new initiative, a new program called ACES, where we're specifically looking at a program where we're going into the high schools, but part of that is also working directly with parents to help them be aware we're targeting special populations. So in short, I think what institutions have to do, which many of us are already doing, is to really take our programs into the community and design targeted communications in ways that really talk about access to higher education very differently, recognizing they have different experiences that lead them to the college.
Well said, Dr. Pollard.
May I add a faculty?
Okay.
Being a faculty member, I'm all about how practical can I be. And I think for the students that I've worked with, I think most of them don't understand college. They don't understand the hidden rules in college. They don't understand how to navigate college systems. I think it was Kay McClenny who said that when they were doing some of their reporting for all of those great surveys that they collect down at the University of Texas at Austin, she said that some of the students who were reporting on average, they would come to the campus 8 times in order to register for classes. I don't know a single one of us in this room that would do anything 8 times in person. Okay, I get mad when Amazon doesn't get my cart going with 1 click. So imagine how our students feel. So from a faculty perspective, I think that goes along with my point number 3. We need to see beyond in how we support faculty and train them, because our faculty are the ones who are working with students, and we can help them understand those hidden rules and understand how to do college. As an aside, my director at the Teach Institute at Arundel Community College just finished up her PhD in about 6 months ago. Her dissertation was all about parent involvement in community colleges. And I know from her literature review, she was scraping for resources and articles and research related to it. So I think, as you've mentioned, this is an area that we haven't tapped. 4 years do this well. There's parent weekends, and they woo them with, coming to our college in September, and we might be able to learn from some of their practices.
Very true.
We've got about 10 more minutes, and I think we can maybe do a couple more questions. I see somebody right here. Clement, please.
This question is for any panel members. Where do you see...
Just 1 second, Clement, she's got a mic for you.
Where do you see, or do you see, the voice of the student in this conversation?
I think it's impossible to have this conversation without the students, because often the students are able to tell you exactly what it is that they need. And just an example from, the easiest place to pull an example from is from your own institution, but we have presidential dialogues where we meet with the students and we ask them, what do you want? What do you need? What do you like? What's working for you and what isn't working? And we get some of the most valuable information and action items from those dialogues. So it's difficult sometimes to get students to participate on committees or task force. They may drop in and drop out as their schedule changes and as they're able to participate. And some of them will complete surveys and some of them won't. But when you invite them to a dialogue and feed them, they come.
Dr. Pierce, well said. Just real quickly, when we convened the commission on this conversation, the very first meeting, Kay McClenny, and most of you in the room know Kay, director of CESE, Community College Survey of Student Engagement, but we had a chance to listen to the voice of students. We had a couple of videos where she really engaged students quite a bit, and that was what Jen was referencing earlier. Anybody else want to, I'm sorry?
Oh, I just wanted to comment, if you haven't looked at Kay McClenny's book, and there's a co-author, it's called Are We Listening? It is fascinating. She and that group have done, thousands, hundreds of thousands of surveys, and there's 4 that she uses to combine. And it's everything we're talking about today. We have the student voices. We just don't listen to them.
Rick, you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, it's very important to include them, particularly when you find activities that are not going as well as you want them to, or when you're trying something new. Later today, you'll hear about a Chesapeake College redesign in developmental, and one of the things that we know we have to do is find out from the student. We'll know what's working from the ones who succeed. We need to find out why we're not succeeding with the ones who are having trouble. And that's one of the things that we're including as a huge component of the review this semester is student feedback on their experience.
Okay, next question, please. Let me kind of come in here. Yes, ma'am, up here in the maroon.
My question is for Lara. I'm very excited about your model. That's you.
Okay, I was like,
Jennifer.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you.
I'm sorry,
I know.
Jennifer.
My maiden name was Gross, so I feel like I've improved with Lara.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm okay with it.
Very excited about your model of integrating that orientation piece into a first-year course. Is it available? Will you put it as a model on a website, or should I just email you privately?
Definitely email me, but I think one of the things that we always talk about with the 21st Century Commission in this report is a lot of times awesome stuff is happening, and I know there's awesome stuff at everybody's institutions, but they are not brought to scale. So what we're doing is we just ran a pilot with a focus group of students, and what was lovely about that, kind of about what Richard was saying, is that students were like, yes, this is great. They were taking notes on the orientation. And what we know next semester is that we'll run it with just our introductory courses. Again, it's beta. And then we will make improvements from there. And then we're hoping next fall it really is ready for full-blown go. So yes, please email me. I have my business card, and we can talk more.
I think we got a question up here in the back, please.
Thank you, Walter. My name is Greg Schuckman. I'm a commissioner on MHEC. I heard more than once you say that there are regulations that are burdensome, inhibiting completion. I didn't hear any specifics. I don't know if they're MHEC reports, if they're federal reports, but we're looking at two things. We're looking at the Higher Ed Act rewrite starting next year. I think it'll be done in 2018 probably, Walter, historically. But we're also doing
I can barely hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Did you hear the original question? It was about regulations that are inhibiting work towards completion and reporting requirements that are inhibiting. So I didn't know if they were MHEC requirements, if they were federal requirements, but it would help to know some of the specifics if you can share them, because we're doing two things. As you know, we're doing the strategic plan update for the state. There's an opportunity for you. And then there's also the Higher Ed Act rewrite that'll start next year. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone over here care to respond?
Okay. Well, I think that some of the regulations that sort of impede progress are the ones that revolve around transfer. I think it's difficult sometimes for students to be, they end up with more credits than they need because we don't control the gen ed electives with our four-year partners as robustly as I think that we could if we put some teeth into the regulations. In terms of some of the reporting, I think that and I'm not the institutional research office, but there is a great deal of reporting that's required both federally and at the state level that requires a lot of time. And so the institutional research offices, some in the colleges are better staffed than others. Some institutional research offices in the smaller schools consist of one person. And so when they spend all of their time doing the compulsive reports, they're not able to put in the time and effort to support outcomes assessments or learning assessments or support faculty in research that will help them increase the student velocity and progress. So it's hard to say one thing, but I think it's just the overwhelming conglomeration of things. One of the reports that we recently submitted was not MHEC. This was a report that was required by Health and Human Services, and it was about competency, or cultural competency in nursing and allied health programs. That report was extremely long. It took a great deal of work for the faculty to complete, and it's really documenting work that they have done and could have been done in a much easier way. There was a very, very short window where faculty were given the opportunity to respond to that report, and it was done in the summer when the majority of faculty were off campus. So the turnaround, the report was made, the requirement was put in. I'm not sure that it's going to enhance anything.
Well, Dr. Pierce, let me say thank you, and I have to apologize. I see a lot of hands that are still up. Mr. Commissioner, I want to say thank you for the question. Appreciate your openness to hear about if there were regulations that were impeding progress. At this time, I want to invite Dr. Kurtinitis back up. I think are we there? Well, you can take another question. We can take another question, I'm told. Yes, ma'am, right up front here. We can get a microphone. I thought I had been given the sign to wrap up, but hey, yeah, that means something where I'm from, you know.
Well, you're the only one who listens. Hello. One of the things that Jennifer said that I definitely believe is true is that we know what to do, but we're not doing it in a lot of ways. For example, that we know that students should finish their developmental before taking English, before taking math and English, before taking science. And I see that there are some schools in different states that are specific about you have to take these courses before you move on. And I wanted to know, is there a reason, or is there a, coming around to someone or some president saying specifically that, okay, what we're going to do is make these students take these things, because we know that they'll be more successful if they finish those developmental before they have to move on into other classes. So I wanted to...
Well, what I find very interesting about your question is that several of us at my institution were talking one day, and I said, it reminds me, Dr. Bumphus gave the history in terms of when community colleges started, and we saw 100 years ago, but you look at most of them came into fruition in the 60s. And what I find amazing about that 60s and 70s, it was like the free love period. And we decided that we didn't necessarily, we're going to let the students kind of come to us, and they will, make their way, and we'll suggest to them things that they should do, but we really don't want to limit them. We want them to kind of have opportunity. I'll stop there. So what I think is very compelling about that is that, as Jennifer so eloquently put earlier, while it has been successful for a good number of students, it has not been successful for the clear majority of students. And I think we have to have a conversation in very substantive ways about how we design organizations and redesign them around the needs, interests, and abilities of our students, and less about the people that work there. Right?
If I could just weigh in on that one really quickly. Kay McClaney, and Jennifer referenced her, and several others have too, speaks about the fact students don't do optional. We know that. But what I heard her speak about last week was, and I won't name the district, but there was one district that had 10,000 courses that students could take as an option. And when they looked at what 80% of the courses that most students were in, it was 20.
Yep.
So think about that for a minute in terms of the options we give students. And I think that further supports the notion in the report about creating pathways, restructuring pathways, structuring opportunities for students to be more successful. Matter of fact, I see Dr. Kurtinitis to my left. I do believe it is time for me to now bring her back up here. Folks, how about another hand for Dr. Kurtinitis?
Well, panel, this was great. And Walter, having you with us is like having the mountain come to Maryland. Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. Let's give them all. This was amazing. It's amazing. And maybe we'll ask more questions through the day, but let me just say a couple of things. I'm glad some of our legislator colleagues are here, because this is an important conversation for us, but we are important for Maryland. 500,000 people, 500,000 Marylanders come to us every year, and 500,000 Marylanders can't be wrong. And the nice thing to remember, Mr. Harris, I see you there, please remember this, 91% of our graduates will remain to live and work right here in Maryland. We are the most flexible, the most resilient. You've heard wonderful suggestions for how we're going to improve. So now we will have you all, if you would, I think you all signed up, most of you signed up for presentations, and the locations are well outlined, not the locations, the places where they take place are well outlined in this booklet. We are a campus that still uses letters for building designations, and we have a whole troop of people out there to make sure that you know how to get to B and D and E and F. This is Q, so if you're doing something in Q, you're in the right place. Lunch is at whatever time lunch is set here, and it will be in the gymnasium, and then another round of presentations by just amazing people from Maryland's community colleges, and then we come back here shortly around 3 for a little rally. So enjoy this day, some great conversation. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be a colleague of people like this.